back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan, and we're going to quickly break down the South Carolina's 16-7 loss on Saturday against Clemson. Talk a little bit about kind of what to expect in the next week or so with the portal, as far as what we can tell right now. And then I think probably next week we'll get into more like overarching looks at the season, which I know, Alan, right now you were doing some behind the score like for the entire season and kind of breaking down the trends. And we can talk a little bit about that today too. But obviously no game. It's completely out of the picture, right, at this point.
I mean, it's never out until all the spots are filled on Sunday, but they would need several teams to turn down bowl bids. So like 99.999999.
Right. And like we said, we're already kind of seeing some portal movement and stuff. The portal officially opens on Monday, December 4th, but we're already kind of seeing some people start to talk about their offers and talk about their intention to enter the portal on Monday. It's kind of weird ground, I guess, because you don't want to speculate on people that are student athletes, but with the university. But obviously, once enough people have reported on something, you kind of just roll with it. So if we want to talk about that one real quick, Donovan Westmoreland is the only one that's officially come out with his intention to enter the portal on Monday. Obviously, playing time wise, that makes a lot of sense. That's not a big loss, and that's one of those that kind of feels like it could be just good for everyone involved. Clears up a roster spot. Westmoreland can find a place that maybe can contribute a little bit more. We'll see how that goes. And then as far as a couple of targets on South Carolina's end to maybe just go out and start thinking about, we've seen an offer out to tight end Tyler Neville. That's out of Harvard. So targeting the Ivy League again. And then an offensive lineman from Southern Miss, Jercon Scott. I've also heard some speculation on North Carolina's running back.
Elijah Green.
Correct. Which all three of those are positions, if you look at my weekly recruiting wrap-up from last week, that I said are likely candidates. Might be some targeting of the edge. Probably would like one more veteran wide receiver. And if Antoine Wells comes back as he says he is, it'd be nice to have someone on the other end there. So, a lot more stuff coming in the coming days. We already have the transfer portal tracker posted on the Insiders Forum on GamecockScoop.com. I will have a separate thread of potential targets and stuff going later today. It's about to be a crazy week. On every other note, except for football, men's basketball gets back in action tonight against Notre Dame. The women go to North Carolina later this week. We'll have full coverage of all of that as we kind of shift our focus towards spell, but obviously it's football season year-round, so we'll talk football in every podcast and on the site all year long. Anyway, let's get into this football game. So obviously a defensive struggle. Clemson does not score an offensive touchdown, which obviously you would have taken pregame if you had kind of laid out that scenario. But they do score scoop and score touchdown on the second play of the game. And then gone out and throws an interception on the next play. So two of your first three plays are a turnover. You still kind of, fought your way back into it. You had a nice drive after that to cut the deficit 10-7. But really just never felt like the offense got going after that one nice drive. Defense played great, but you give up three career-long field goals to the Clemson kicker, and that's just kind of the way things go sometimes. Missed opportunities. There was a O'Donnell Fortune interception, potentially like pick six that slipped through his hands. That turns into a field goal. You get the ball back right before halftime with really good field position and go backwards. Don't get any points there. Just a frustrating game. Pretty much all the fun offensive fireworks happened in the first, 5 minutes of the game, and then it was pretty much over from there. What were your takeaways? Also, I guess the other thing I didn't mention just in the overall summation of what I saw is that crowd was ready to explode and immediately got the wind sucked out of it on that pick six, or at the scoop and score, I mean. And it felt like you really never got that full breadth of the season record crowd on Saturday night.
I think my main takeaway, just kind of stacking up the whole thing, kind of looking at both that game and looking at where that game fits into what is now a completed season, is that's just what it was for more of the year than not. You scored a first quarter touchdown on offense. You put a really good drive together. We saw that at Georgia. We saw that against North Carolina. And then the offense went flat. You struggled to block. Routley was running for his life. You couldn't get a running game going. You had trouble getting separation on the outside, which other than Leggett, that's been an issue at times this year. It just looked like so much of what this year has been. It kind of felt like a very fitting way for it to end, or for the season to get ended. As for the scoop and score, I mean, you've run that play a lot this year. Spencer said post-game that's one of those where it's not supposed to be backwards, but it's also not supposed to be forwards, just kind of wherever the ball gets out of his hand on that particular play. I'm not sure why you're counting on Leggett to catch the ball. I know that's where it starts, but I'm not really sure why you have that in your book anyway, if it could go backwards. Like, I'm not really sure what the idea of that being backwards is. We've seen them run similar stuff forward, like the AB stuff, the Josh Simon stuff, the little quick curls. That's just a really, really tough break as early as it was the second snap of the game. And that just kind of felt like it set the tone for the whole night. And like you said about the crowd, you never really, even though you did tie the game later in the first quarter, you never really got it back.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I thought, no, you never tied it. They had already made the field goal, so it was 10-7. But still, you were obviously within reach for the majority of the game. You just never could get it back together. At one point, you punted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight times, and then ended the game on a turnover on downs after that touchdown. So, yikes! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those were 3 and outs as well. So
the last
really,
one of those
really,
punts, I thought it was bad. I asked Shane about it post game. He said they thought about going for it, but they wanted to try to pin him down by the cockpit and maybe force a turnover or get a 3 and out. I thought it was bad, but also, like Shane said in the answer, we were 2 for 13 on third downs, what he said. I don't know how you can have confidence in a 4th and 7.
I was about to bring up that quote. He said something about like the way you were playing on third down didn't give you much confidence. 4th down, which I do tend to agree with. And your defense was playing pretty well. I mean, again, like we talk about the defensive statistics, you gave up 200-something yards rushing, which is maybe not ideal, but a lot of that came, pretty late on that last drive. Even
so, there weren't really any chunk plays running.
Yeah, exactly. And you kept them out of the red zone for the entirety of the game until the last drive. Only gave up 9 points on defense. Like I said, very easily could have only been 6 points if O'Donnell Fortune holds on to that interception. Of that, I think, was enough to win the game. You just didn't have your own offense show up in any meaningful way to have it happen. But I don't know. From the way that the game script was going, I'm okay with the punt because your defense was playing pretty well. Maybe you felt like it was getting late early with the way your offense was playing, and it was worth going for it there.
That's kind of what I was thinking. It was like 9.5 minutes. I was thinking you probably only get 2 possessions anyway. It ended up only being 1 more. So if you're punting there, you're counting on scoring every time you get the ball back at that point.
Yeah, and by that point, your defense is a little gassed, and you are giving up longer drives and letting those runs kind of link together. if you want to talk about like some weird reffing, it definitely didn't go South Carolina's way, although I don't think you can blame a whole lot on that. But the scoop and score did feel like after a bunch of replays, it looked basically like right in the line, but you called fumble on the field, so you kind of had to leave it as it was on after the replay. There was another play early on where Cade Klubnik looked pretty dead to rights and kind of threw it away and didn't get a intentional grounding call that I think would have taken Clemson out of
field
goal range.
The second field goal.
But again, those are a couple of little moments. It just felt like a weird game that the ball did not bounce the direction you needed to at pretty much any key time.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about this. I'll say it. I got it wrong. I think everybody did. Clemson's kicker comes into the game 1 for 7 on field goals over 40 all year. He goes 3 for 3. That's a whole football game. They win by 9. That's credit to him. I'm not saying like that's just not something I don't think any of us had that on the bingo card. I was honestly surprised Dabo sent him out there for that first one. It was 49, I think. And it was 4th and 6, I think, off the top of my head. I was surprised to even see him out there, and then he puts that one through, and I guess that kind of sets him on the course to hit 2 more from 41 and 42, I think they were.
I'll say after you make that one, he obviously had the confidence from there on. Man, I don't know. It was a painful watch. I'll say that. Just very I felt like I was watching a hockey game. In the worst possible way. I guess there are some questions that start to come up based on last 2 performances against pretty solid defenses. I think throughout the season, you kind of felt like Dowell Loggins had been an upgrade of what was going on last year, but then we saw both of the last 2 performances, things went pretty well as long as the plays were scripted, but then pretty much as soon as both those defenses settled in, you had some real problems. Any concerns, I guess, as you look ahead to 2024? Do you feel like you kind of have your guy, or do these last couple of games give you pause?
Concerns, no. Questions, yes. I think you hit it right there. I actually have the numbers for like first quarter versus second quarter, some stuff from what I wrote yesterday if you're subscribed. Like, there is a very sharp drop off of this offense all season, but especially the last 2 games between scripted stuff and versus when you kind of got to get into the flow of a game. I still think this still all the way comes back to your offensive line. You watched the Kentucky game, you watched the Clemson game, you watched all the games this year. You got to be able to block. I know it sounds simple. That doesn't really count as analysis. That's not what you guys are here for, but blocking and tackling, it's football. And they didn't block well Saturday night. They didn't block well for most of the season. And I think you kind of saw that's the end result when you have 12 offensive linemen hurt. And yeah. And
so Spencer said it. He got rid of the ball pretty quickly a lot of the night. Clemson only ended up with 2 sacks, but 8 QB hurries. You really had no time to do anything downfield, which is why you saw a lot of the dink and dunk. And then to Clemson's credit, they tackled very well in space all night, one-on-one situations. So that's really good defense. And Clemson kind of was, I guess, what they've been through most of the year. Klubnik struggled to pass the ball like we would. You forced them to throw it. They didn't score very many points, but their defense held up in a major way. And yeah, I think the offensive line issues should get better just from a year more in the program of all those guys. You get a Marquis Anderson back who probably would have contributed this year too had he not been injured. You probably still want to try to look in the portal. We already said that they put out an offer to that guy from Southern Miss. And then the 2024 group's really, really good. But again, we've seen what it's like when you're starting a freshman, no matter how good you are in the SEC. So you'd like those to be your depth guys instead of maybe starting the way that you had to throw Tro and Tree in this year.
Yeah, but also, like you say, you're going to get a second-year version of Tro and Tree next year. You should have Jalen Nichols back next year. I would assume he's still got eligibility, obviously, after not playing a snap this season. That's a mainstay. You can plop in, either at left tackle if you wanted to move Tree somewhere else or somewhere else in the line for Nichols. But either way, that right there, that feels like 3-year spots out of 5.
Henry as well.
Case and Henry back next year. That's a tackle. I think you feel I don't want to say good about it after what you saw this year. It ended up being 41 sacks and 92 tackles for loss in 12 games. I mean, that's just kind of insane to even say out loud, but that's what it was. Better about it, maybe, but you're right. I think what you learned this year more than anything else is you need depth. You need more than 5 guys you feel good about, because guys are going to get hurt next year. There might not be 12 season-ending injuries, but guys are going to get hurt next year on the offensive line. Sorry to break it to you guys. It's going to happen. So you need to figure out more than 5 there.
I think you feel cautiously optimistic, right? You feel like a lot of young guys had to play this year that hopefully are going to take those lessons and be better for it next year, even though you definitely took your lumps this year, as you just read off. And then I guess if we're kind of looking at the defense over the course of the season, and definitely over the course of the final stretch, it's hard to argue that they didn't get better. I know around mid-season we were kind of speculating on Clayton White's future and if he might be a sacrificial lamb or whatever, but like based on the way that they played over the final stretch, I don't think he necessarily did anything to warrant that. We'll see. I mean, I saw some like Twitter trolls or whatever posting rumors. I don't think that any of that is true right now, based on anything that I've heard. So we'll see. I mean, this week we would probably start to hear some rumblings around coaching changes, if there are any. But White's still under contract for another year as well, which kind of helps him out there, I think.
I think my main question right now for your defense is, are you a 3-3-5 team now? Or are you a 4-2-5 team that runs a 3-3-5? Was the 3-3-5 your break glass in case of emergency this year that you just maybe put back in the case for next? Like, I guess kind of what is that? We've beaten the scheme change to death. We talked about it pretty much every show for the last 6 weeks, and the defense has played better. But what does that actually mean for you going forward with your roster? How you're looking at the portal? What are you trying to fit in? I'll be very interested in the personnel specifically they target in the portal defensively, and kind of what that might mean scheme-wise going forward.
I mean, to me, it seems pretty difficult at this point to keep Bam Martin-Scott off the field.
Yeah.
Is that in a 3 linebacker set only? Could he be another linebacker in the 4-2-5? I don't know. I mean, you look at your linebacker depth. Again, we're talking about some young guys that played this year that should only get better. We're talking about a very strong linebacker class for 2024. We're talking about guys like Jerron Willis, who flashed here and there as well. It might fit your personnel better. I mean, obviously, we got to see what's going to happen in the portal. But yeah, I mean, you're bringing in Dylan Stewart. You hope Umio Zulu takes a step forward. Those guys, I think, could still play in the 3-3-5 as edge rushers or defensive ends or whatever you want to call them in that new system. So, yeah, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to see. It would be surprising if pretty much all that linebacker group is back, including Ben Martin-Scott, that you don't at least see some of it in every game.
Yeah, I tend to think it fits your personnel better, but I also think you can't. I mean, it's for us to speculate, but you kind of have to have a plan in place before you target kids in the portal, because you need to be able to sell where they fit. And I think that's where your questions for the immediate term come from.
Unfortunately, we don't get to see what your preseason prediction was, which was that Lenore Sellers would play in the bowl game, because there's not a bowl game.
Whoops.
I think you might have been right if there was one, and Brett Eller would have moved on to focus on the Senior Bowl or whatever. Is that kind of what I mean, obviously it's November 28th, with 3 days after the 2020 season. There's a lot that can still happen, but would that be your projection right now of who the starting quarterback is on day one?
I think it would have to be, just based on Rattler's going to be gone. He hasn't said that, but he was basically talking exclusively in past tense about South Carolina in that post-game Saturday. B, you saw what Sellers did. You saw the flashes. You saw them work packages in for him against Kentucky down the stretch. You saw the Vanderbilt game, the Furman game. And C, Luke Doty moving to wide receiver kind of clears that path.
Yeah, and I mean, you still could see maybe Doty come back to quarterback and shoot his shot there. But I think I would project the same thing, just based on what we've seen thus far. I was trying to look at Mario Anderson's Twitter, but I can't right now. Did you see he basically put a post that sounded very much like a farewell to me? Did you read it that way, or did you see
I
that?
did not see that.
It was basically just like thanks for the opportunity sort of thing. So
Right.
We'll have to see. We speculated that it would be kind of surprising if he tried to make the leap, but I don't know. I'll try to see if I can find the actual wording of that sometime soon. I'll post it on the Insiders Forum if I can find it again. I can't find it right now. But anyway, I'm trying to think if there's any other just like obvious sort of talking points as we wrap up this season. Obviously, we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive, maybe give a way too early depth chart in the next couple of weeks, just to start to look at what 2024 looks like. I also saw that you found, or you kind of did a process of elimination of what the schedule is likely to look like.
A couple
and
games,
it looks like,
yeah.
What do you remember offhand, those couple of games?
Well, first of all, Chris Lowe from ESPN dropped a report yesterday. Basically had kind of your marquee SEC games leaked, your Alabama LSUs, your Texas A&Ms, Georgia, Alabama, things like that. I don't know. There was about a dozen, maybe 15 games that he got the dates for. And it kind of taking those off the board and looking at some other non-con stuff. It sure looks like you're going to Kentucky week 2 and you're hosting LSU week 3 next year. Those are your first 2 SEC games.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the opponents for next year, you have LSU, you have Alabama, you have Oklahoma. Like, there's really no good way that could fall. But there are better ways than others.
I mean, Kentucky week 2 is not terrible just because they're going to be breaking in a new quarterback. LSU week 3, they're going to be breaking in a new quarterback and replacing maybe the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. I don't think that's awful if that's what it is, which it definitely looks like that is going to be what it is. It would more just be, my question is like, okay, where does the Vanderbilt game fall? Is there going to be a chance to like stack wins with that somewhere? Where does your Alabama trip fall? Where do your bye weeks fall? Because it looks like everyone's getting 2 byes next year with 14 dates. I think that's kind of made me the questions beyond just what it looks like, which is Kentucky, LSU out of the chute in the league.
And you said those were home games?
Kentucky's a road game. LSU's a home game.
Yeah, but at the very least, hopefully you don't end up with 4 out of your first 5 on the road or whatever it was this year, or 4 out of your first 5 SEC games on the road.
Right.
Which obviously was pretty tough. I do think if we're just talking about season-long takes again, you have to be somewhat impressed with the way that South Carolina, or that Beamer and the staff were able to kind of hold things together despite starting 2-6. You battled back. I mean, you looked like you belonged on the field with Clemson on Saturday as well. Just, the game didn't quite play out the way that you wanted it to. But really, I mean, you think about the losses this season, there weren't very many where you felt like you weren't in it late, even though you lost 7 games.
Missouri is the one that sticks out. You were never in that game from the jump. But, like, yeah, you feel like the Florida game is still the one that you feel like cost you your bowl game. You were right there. You had a 10-point lead with under 4 to go, or under 5 to go. Yeah, Clemson 2-score game in the fourth quarter. Georgia was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. A&M, you were down 7 in the fourth quarter at one point, although I don't really know if you felt like you were in it. Yeah, Tennessee, the other one. You cut it to 14 with like 8 minutes to go, but you were never really in that game. But other than Tennessee and Missouri, I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, and, even so, you have a lot of guys that are potentially going to be graduating or trying their hand at the NFL that had every reason at 2-6 to not, necessarily give their best on the stretch, and you kept that together. So I do think that that's encouraging. I don't know. It feels like a lost season a little bit, I guess, if you're a South Carolina fan. You're like not ready to burn the place down or anything, but certainly disappointed.
C-. D plus. How are we grading this year if you have to do it? I kind of think that's about where the neighborhood I am.
Yeah, I think C minus, although I'm tempted to give a D plus to any year that you don't make a bowl. But we knew going in that the schedule was rough. You basically reached your your Vegas win total. You definitely didn't exceed expectations pretty much anywhere along the way. But you kind of won the games that you were expected to, lost the games you were expected to, lost a close one to Florida that you probably should have won. Yeah, C minus sounds about right to me. The real question now becomes, who do you lose in the portal? Who are you able to pick up in the portal? These next few weeks are going to be crucial. Now, maybe the benefit of not having a bowl is you don't have to really split your focus. If you're Shane Beamer and that staff right now, your entire focus for the next month is convincing those kids to stay and finding, turning over rocks, finding what you can in the portal.
Yep, you've got, I mean, between today and signing day, what is that, 23 days, if I'm doing the math right? You've got 23 days to kind of mold the next direction of this program. That doesn't completely fall within those days. You got portal time after that. The portal's not even open yet. But between now and December 20th, you're going to know a lot. You're going to know how much of this signing class you feel like might be a turning point for you actually gets over the finish line and gets to campus. You'll have a better idea of the portal 3 weeks from now. If there's staff changes in the next 3 weeks, they're going to, well, if there's staff changes, it's going to happen between now and signing day, you would think. It's a very, very crucial 3.5 weeks here.
Definitely. All right, well, that's about all I wanted to hit on for today. I mean, obviously, if you watched that game on Saturday, everything that needed to happen was kind of over in the first quarter, and obviously we didn't know it then, but that's kind of how it played out. But anyway, we will have plenty more on South Carolina versus Notre Dame tonight. That's a pretty big test, one of the few tests left in the non-conference for the men, who are undefeated and received a few votes in the AP voting this week. So, right on the cusp there. And then we'll have tons of portal coverage over the weekend and into next week as all that starts to open up and the chaos begins. We will be back here. We'll probably go back to once a week for now. So we'll be back here at the beginning of next week to kind of talk about the portal and talk about everything that happened over the weekend. Until then, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you later.